Hello everyone, welcome to my channel on understanding finance and sports. My name is Faisal Hasnain and today we'll talk about the staffing structure within a sports organization. We'll go over an example. So what do we mean by staffing structure? The staffing structure is the way in which the workforce of any organization really is organized into a specific hierarchy and job roles and responsibilities. In order to properly undertake the tasks that achieve the organization's objectives. So here we are talking about organizing your staff in a way that achieves the organization's objectives, its mission. Another way of looking at the staffing structure is to think about all the work that is to be done by the organization and then to envisage that this work must be divided up amongst the workforce in a properly structured manner. Now, the usual method by which the work is divided up is according to business function. So, for example, in a manufacturing company, the business functions might include production, marketing, sales, administration, maintenance, human resources, etc. Staff are then employed at various levels to ensure that each function is smoothly and properly carried out. Staffing structures also evolve over time as circumstances change. And there are many different ways that staff can be structured. And this will vary from company to company and from industry to industry. And each company and industry will have its own special characteristics and requirements. And sports obviously is an industry on its own with its own special nuances and characteristics. So a sports organization will be structured in a very different way from, let's say, a manufacturing company and have certain departments which are specific to sports. So let's have a look at this. Let's have a look at the business functions that would reside in a sports organization. And here I'm talking about a sports organization that could, for example, be a world governing body of sports or a sports team or a sports club, whether it's a national association. So these are examples of the sort of departments that you'll find within a sports organization. Obviously, you will have the office of the CEO. You need someone to lead the organization. You'll then have the sport department. So for example, in the case of, let's say, FIFA, you would have a department that runs the game, the sport, football. And in a badminton organization, you would have a department that runs the sport itself, badminton. And we'll talk a little bit more about the sport department. Effectively, this is where everything to do with the sport itself is centralized. You have the commercial department. These are the staff members who will go out and try and raise revenues for the organization. And again, we'll have a look at this a little bit later. Finance department, as is usual in any organization. Media and communications. Now, a sports organization, if it's something like a FIFA or a national association, is a public interest organization. And therefore, it's normally always under the spotlight. There are people very interested in what's going on. You need to manage the image of the organization and the press releases that the organizations make, and the media and communications department act as the spokespeople for that organization and are sort of the liaison between the public and the organization itself. You could have a department that looks at the objectives and strategy that the organization is following. They will constantly review the progress against the strategic plan. Legal and company secretarial. This department will review the commercial contracts and ensure compliance with rules and regulations. Game development, very important in the case of, let's say, a national association or a world governing body. You want the game, the sport, to spread all over the world, and therefore, whether it's international or national, so here you will have a department that seeks to expand the reach of that sport, all over the world. The sports academy, if you're a club, let's say like a Real Madrid or a Barcelona or Manchester United, you have your own training academy where you will not only be training and developing young players, but your sports academy could also have a high performance center to train your first team players, or in the case of a national association, the national squad. Internal audit. These days, this is a must for most major organizations, so that there are independent checks and controls that are constantly being monitored by your internal audit department. Anti-corruption and anti-doping. These are the integrity units, and anti-corruption and anti-doping issues are becoming more and more prominent these days. So you need to have people looking after that side of the equation, and making sure that the sport is free of match fixing and use of narcotics, for example, to enhance performance. Sports medicine and medical issues. Here you would have people who are looking at things like player injuries, player workload, looking at new modern methods to treat sort of injuries and sprains and muscle pulls to sportsmen. And this is actually quite a specialized area now, and there are specialist sports medicine people who are constantly looking at this aspect of physical fitness. Events, obviously, if you're a FIFA or the IOC, you will have major events like the World Cup or the Olympics. In the case of, let's say, a team like Barcelona or Manchester United, you will have weekly events. Every week you've got a match, whether it's at home or away. So you'll have an events team that is looking at all the events that you are either conducting or your teams are participating in. Match officials. Here, a national association or a governing body will make sure that the umpires and referees are constantly are mentored, are trained, and they are evaluated after each match, and their performance is constantly being monitored, as well as their health and fitness to be able to referee matches. If you're a team such as Barcelona or again Real Madrid, you will obviously have your players and your coaches, and they need to be obviously managed by someone. You may have a stadium, or you may have other physical infrastructure. You may have a head office, etc., and you need people to look after all that and make sure that your stadiums are up to the mark. Again, if you're a club such as Arsenal or Manchester United, there will be someone looking at club membership and all the affairs of the club. You may also have interactions with the supporters club. And then, of course, you'll have the administration units looking at day-to-day things like the HR department, the IT department, travel and logistics, etc. So that should give you a bit of an idea on the sort of departments that one would normally expect to find in a sports organization. So let's look at the office of the chief executive. So you'll have the chief executive officer, the CEO, and here what I would suggest is that the CEO shouldn't really have too many people reporting into him, because he needs really to look at the most important issues and also have time on his hands to progress and lead the organization. So my view would be that the CEO should probably have, in the example that I just gave, 4 direct reports. You've got the head of sport, the chief commercial officer or the chief revenue officer, the chief operating officer, which I'll talk about, and the chief financial officer. The internal audit unit in some cases reports to the CEO, but I think it's better if the internal audit unit reports to the chairman of the audit committee, so it is truly independent from management. And this group of 5, the G5, the big 5, I think should be the senior management group of the organization. If we now look at the head of sport, what areas should fall under the person who's heading your sports department, which some people might say is the most important department because that's what the organization is all about. He would head your events. Obviously, the events has got to do with the sport itself. So whether it's organizing the Olympic Games or something like the Asian Games, the Commonwealth Games, or a FIFA World Cup, interaction with the local organizing committee in the country where the games are going to be held, or in the case of a football club such as Arsenal, the weekly matches. All these events should come under the head of sport, and he will have a senior events manager to head the events department. Again, game development. Here you're talking about spreading the game worldwide in more and more territories. And again, we spoke a little bit about the academy where you develop players. Again, the game development department, including your global development program or national development program, or your regional development program could come under the head of sport. The training, monitoring, and evaluation of your match officials, again, would naturally fall under the head of sport. Similarly with coaches and trainers. The team and the players, obviously, that would definitely fall under the head of sport. And you would have people looking at these individual areas and reporting into the head of sport. The rules and regulations, very important. These are constantly being reviewed, and in light of circumstances, sometimes new regulations or changes in the playing conditions take place for various events. And again, that would come under the person who's heading the sport. New playing conditions, for example, could be the introduction of new game technology, such as the VAR technology that is now being used in football. Sports medicine, again, would naturally fall under the area of the head of sport. The various formats of the game. And here, there are certain sports where you've got different formats, like rugby has the rugby sevens, or in the case of cricket, you've actually got 4 formats these days. You've got the tests, the ODIs, the T20 format, and now the latest T10 format. These days, it's also important to have someone who's looking at women's sport and encouraging increased participation of women and looking after all aspects of the game being played by women. And then we spoke about the integrity. The anti-corruption and anti-doping units again would fall naturally under the head of sport. So it's a huge mandate, really, especially if you're looking at a governing body or a national association. So that's a huge area. In the case of a national association, you would also have, when you're talking about events, you would also have the domestic structure for the sport, which would be maybe part of the development program, but you could have the domestic structure also in here. Let's look at the mandate of the chief commercial officer, or some people may prefer to call that the chief revenue officer, who's in charge of business development and bringing the money into the organization. Whether it's the sale of media and broadcast rights or the sale of digital rights in the case of major organizations. Looking at sponsorship and sales, including the marketing function, and sale of licenses and sale of merchandise, which are normally outsourced to third parties. And of course, looking at promoting the brand, effectively bringing in the revenues into the organization. So this is an extremely important function because you need money to function. Okay, the Chief Operating Officer, the COO is the person who will keep the engine room running, handle all the day-to-day operations, look at your day-to-day stuff like your HR function, IT admin, and your infrastructure. He would oversee the media and communications and be responsible for public relations. Look at strategy, legal affairs, board and committee affairs, and all meetings. If you're a club membership issues, club services, and also undertake special projects. So effectively, this person would effectively pick up all the operational aspects of running the organization. And finally, the Chief Financial Officer is going to look at financial compliance, look at what happens to the money that comes in and what happens to the money that goes out. And at the end of the day, to do that, he would probably have a management accountant, a financial accountant, a treasury management would be carried out within that department, budgeting and regular reporting, and he would probably also be the secretary to the organization's finance committee. So thanks a lot for watching. I hope that this was interesting, and I hope to see you all very soon. In the meanwhile, take care, and this is Faisal signing out.